Hello everyone. Going through the first step of sculpting the hand. So we were going to do a hand study using ceramic clay. So using our own hand as a model to work from, trying to get the general shape of a hand is kind of the first step, and then we'll go into more detail as we work along. But this is kind of the first step in making our hand sculpture. Again, this is a hand study, so it's not going to be perfect. It's the first time you've probably done this. So it's really just kind of working through the process and trying to look closely at a three-dimensional object and sculpting it out of ceramic clay. Okay, so don't put a lot of pressure on yourself. It's for us to learn and to experiment and try something new and have fun with it. Okay, so everyone should have received a block of stoneware clay. What I want you to do, the first thing I want you to do, is cut that slab based on the thickness of your hand. So just like in the video that we watched in class, you're looking at how thick, look at the thickest part of your hand. I am going to use my left hand as my modeling hand because I am a right-handed person. If you are a left-handed person, you would do the opposite, just because it's easier to use your dominant hand when you are trying something new for the first time. So I'm going to look at my left hand. I am looking at where's the thickest part of my hand. And so when I cut my slab to work from, I want to make sure I am cutting that slab thick enough that it will cover that thickest part of my hand. So I'm going to take, you guys should have received some clay tools in your kit. So you've got this needle tool, which is helpful for getting details and kind of digging stuff out. You should have gotten some sort of loop tool. If not, you should have gotten a paper clip, and it'll work very much the same way. You could even take that paper clip, kind of unfold it, and wrap some tape around the end of a pencil so that you have a handle for it, but it would do the same. It would function the same. You might have also gotten some sort of modeling tool. This one's wood. I also sent home some plastic ones, so you might have a plastic one. But these are really nice for kind of molding and modeling. And then I don't think I sent these knives home, but you can use a butter knife. It'll work the same generally as these. So you might have to use one of like a butter knife for some tools that you find around the house. You'll be amazed at what you can find if you go looking. So a really nice tool that I have at the classroom that you guys might not have is this wire tool. And this makes it really easy to cut through this big slab of clay. I will show you how to do that, but then I'll also show you how you can use like a butter knife or something to cut that slab as well. So again, I'm going to look at my slab. I want to make sure I cut a slab that is going to be deep enough to be my whole hand. So I probably went a little overboard. That might be a little bit wider than I need it to be, but that's okay. We can always pull more clay away. I would rather do that than have to add it back. So with the wire tool, what I'm going to do, it's got these little dowels on the end. I put that in between my fingers, and I can kind of wrap it and find that line, and I'm just going to pull that wire tool through, and it cuts that slab really nice, which if we were in the classroom would be very convenient. However, you guys most likely don't have that wire tool, so I wanted to show you how to do it with some sort of knife. It's not going to turn out as pretty, but it'll work. It'll function. So again, I'm going to measure my hand, the thickness of it, looking mostly at the thickest part of my hand. And just to be on the safe side, I'm going to do that all the way around my block of clay, just so that I have an idea when I'm cutting that I'm not cutting at a weird angle and cutting away more clay than I want. And at this point, you can see my line here and here. I can just kind of eyeball it and kind of match it back up. All right, so at this point, with a knife like this, it's just kind of, you want to go in as straight as possible so that you are not going in at an angle this way or that way and then having some weird kind of zigzaggy stuff going on. It's gonna happen, but I'm just trying to cut it as straight down as possible. And when I brought my blade down, I made sure to look at the line down here that I drew to mark where I needed it. So at this point, you can see over here, I've got to that line I drew. And I'm going to keep doing that, working all the way around, trying to get my knife in there as far as possible so I do actually get to the middle of the slab as I'm working, and trying to keep it straight again as possible. Let's see how bad that looks. How good it looks, right? All right, so it kind of pulled some of the old clay off from when I put the slabs together when I was wedging the clay, but generally that's not bad. So I just took the knife, I tried to cut this way, and then I turned my whole block of clay all the way around so that it cut all sides, got to the center of my block of clay. At this point, you can just kind of get some aggression out. Kind of slam it on the table. Wish I could show you guys a little bit better here. I might back my camera up. Okay, so hopefully you can see that a little better. If you have canvas at home, or if you find that you're really struggling with the clay sticking to your table, I do have some canvas at school, and I can send it home to you, either for you to pick up, or I can drop it off for you. Whatever works. But this will kind of help keep the clay from sticking to the surface. So if you have a table that is like sealed, very smooth, non-porous, the clay will most likely stick to it, and that can get really frustrating. You can also try using like a tablecloth or an old kitchen towel. You might want to ask for permission before you do that, but any kind of fabric will make it so it doesn't stick so much. So I'm just going to throw this a little bit, make sure it's still looking about the width of my hand, and also still the size of my hand. I realize I'm a relatively small person. I haven't seen you guys in person, so I'm not really sure how tall you are. A lot of people have bigger hands than I do, so you might need to throw this slab a little bit bigger. So in that case, if your hands are really large, cut your slab actually at a thicker depth than your actual hand so that you can throw your slab. And the more you throw it, the more it stretches out, the bigger it will become. And then if your hand is bigger, it will fit on that clay. All right, so this is a pretty thick piece of clay. And what we're going to do is I'm going to trace my hand essentially onto the slab of clay. And that's going to be the general shape of it. So I like to draw or trace a little bit at a time and kind of pull it away. And now you can see how thick this is, compared to my hand. So I'm going from my wrist. I started at my wrist and coming up. Okay. So again, just like in the video, we're going to carve away all that extra clay. We're working subtractively. You can save this this clay for later. I would just put it back in the bag of clay that I sent home with you. If it feels like it starts to dry out, put a little bit of water in that bag of clay and it will absorb that overnight. So I'm just going to throw it back onto the block of clay that I had originally cut from. So you can keep your hand on there, or you can kind of pull it away if it makes it easier to cut your tracing away. It doesn't have to be perfect at this point. Right now we're just getting a general shape. All right. So now, I mean, this looks pretty elementary, right? It looks like what you probably did in 3rd grade. But we're going to keep working this. We're going to work this over a few days and really get it refined. So right now it matches my hand pretty well. What we want to start out doing with this, once we get it kind of cut to the shape of our hand, is start to look at the shape of my hand, right? So it's pretty wide here, and then it gets thinner as it comes. I can draw that with my needle tool here. If you don't, I believe I sent everyone home a needle tool. If you don't have one, a pencil will work just to kind of draw it, and then you can use your knife to carve away that extra clay. But what I'm going to do is I'm looking at my pinky finger and kind of just drawing the general shape. There's kind of like, it gets a little wider there before it kind of hits that where the joint matches, like the knuckle would be here is the bottom of my finger, and then the palm is going to get a little bit wider. So at this point I could come in with my knife and really just kind of go along the line that I drew, trying to cut away the extra clay to get a general shape of that part of my hand. Okay, so again, it looks very rough, but we'll come back in and refine it later. And you can do that with all of your fingers as much as possible. It gets a little tricky when you get in here because you can't get your knife in there as easily as your pinky. But just do your best. Leave a little extra because you can always pull that off later. Pull some of that off. And I might have to add a little bit more clay to that. It looks like I might have pulled a little more off than I meant to. Kind of do that on the same side. I'm looking at my thumb. So here's my thumb. I'm going to draw it first because I think that's easier. Then I can go back and change it if I need to. And this is kind of wide right here. This is where it kind of comes up. It's my palm. And this is where I like one of these tools. The loop tools are really nice because it kind of just takes a little bit off at a time. Just follow that line that I drew. Get pulled right off of there. All right. So again, you can see, I'm starting to cut the shape of my hand here. On this side, it's still really thick. So I got to start thinking about looking at it this way. How can I refine this thumb here? So if I'm looking at here, it's really flat here. So I'm going to take my loop tool and kind of think about, it's flat here, and then it comes in to my palm. And kind of cleaning up these, you can see where I originally cut that, where my tracing, very sharp edges. So what you can do is kind of pull those away just to round them out a little bit so you get a better feel for them. So my thumb is at the side, so it's kind of more flat here than it is here, like my fingers are. It's turned to the side a bit, so I'm going to kind of pull some of the extra clay out of there. So it really is kind of like a back and forth. You want to, pull some clay away, look at your hand, try it again, see where your knuckles are and where your fingers join your palm. That might be helpful in carving away. So just like they did in the video, they kind of marked, here are my knuckles here. I kind of want to mark that so I can see where my hand goes. I'm going to take my needle tool here and kind of pull down in between my fingers in the clay. So I can kind of tell how far down my fingers go. So I just kind of pulled that away to get a more accurate measurement of where my fingers come and meet my palm. So I'm going to do the same thing with this finger. And pull that away. Careful not to get, the fingers too thin. You don't want them to kind of fall off of your main body, because then you have to work on reconnecting those. And that's kind of the whole point of doing it using this method, is that you do not have to attach fingers separately, which attaching clay to another body of clay is totally doable. That's what you do in ceramics all the time. However, it is harder to keep it connected if it wasn't originally a part of your first piece of clay, if that makes sense. So you want to keep it this solid piece as much as possible rather than have to reattach any fingers. So again, I'm going to kind of follow how far down my finger goes. And at this point too, I really want to get back to measuring how thick this should be, because right now it's really thick. And getting rid of some of that will be really helpful. So that's kind of where the palm starts. Again, using my loop tool or paper clip, kind of pulling away those big chunks of clay. Just a little at a time. Come back in here. Sorry, I forgot to check to see if I could even see what I'm doing. Kind of thinning out that finger again, because some of the clay kind of pushed in when I was carving away the shape. So you can see, and then I've got to rework the palm of my hand. So I could go back in and work on my middle finger, but I think for the sake of your time, you kind of get the idea of how to carve those fingers so that they are the same width as your actual finger. Now I might want to start working the palm. So just like in the video, you want to start looking at, where's the fatty part of my palm. You can even see just from me holding the clay, the padded part of my palm and where it kind of sinks in. You kind of want to pay attention to that, because that's kind of where you're going to either cut away less clay or you're going to kind of add more back in. You're looking for the thick parts of your hand, is what I'm trying to say. So you can see, I'm just going to start kind of pulling this extra stuff away. So I'll come back in here and shape that middle finger a little later, but right now I'm just kind of looking to so this is where it starts to sink down, it starts to become concave. So I'm going to take my tool and kind of dig some of that out. And if you dig too much out, that's okay, because you can always add more later. All right. Okay, I'm going to come back and do this one real quick. All right, so I just cut some extra away from there. I'm going to kind of work it back in, make sure I didn't cut too much away here. I can even kind of look at it. So make sure you're looking at your hand from all different angles so you do get a good idea of what it looks like from all sides. If you stay looking at one side for too long, it starts to get too detailed in one spot, and then it's hard to make it look like one unified piece after the fact. It would be good to know the anatomy of the hand as well. I do have lots of books here in the classroom talking about the muscles and the different bones, which we could look at, but again, time constraints. We're just going to experiment, and we're going to study just by looking. All right. So that's kind of just looking at the inside of my hand. At this point, I could start to decide, how do I want my hand to be posed? I think I'm just going to kind of leave it like this, like it's going to catch a basketball. What I can start to do now is looking at the outside of my hand. So the inside of the hand is starting to look a little bit more realistic. A little bit. It definitely needs more work. But the outside of my hand still looks like a traced hand. So at this point, I'm going to come, and this is where she brought out, in the video, the artist brought out a pillow to set it down on, which might be helpful if you have, again, roll up a kitchen towel, any kind of soft surface that'll kind of support what you've just molded so it doesn't become flat. I was not prepared for the video, so I don't have one with me right at this moment. So we'll just make do. All right, so we've got my thumb here. I'm going to start marking my knuckles. So I'm looking at this knuckle here. This is a bony landmark that you want to pay attention to. It's that bottom knuckle of your thumb. And that's where that's usually pretty defined. And also thinking about the thumb, again, your thumb is not, when you look at it straight on, it's not flat like your fingers. It's actually kind of turned to the side. So when I'm doing this, I want to make sure that I pay attention to that a little bit. So I've got my knuckles marked on my thumb. I'll come back and do the same thing with my fingers. Oh, my head's probably in the way, huh? There we go. So hopefully you guys can see that better now without my head in the way. Okay. So I can't see on the top yet, but I can see it on the sides. So I'm just going to kind of connect those lines. And kind of carefully, because this clay is still really wet. And flexible, and I don't want to cause it to break. So again, we've got these knuckles here as well that we want to mark. So right now I've only marked, well, I guess I marked the thumb one. I marked like this. On the fingers I marked here and here, here and here, but I didn't mark these yet. So what I'm going to do for those is I'm going to put my hand back on my sculpture, and I'm going to look at kind of the shape of those. So this one is actually kind of at a triangle. It kind of goes like this. So I'm going to draw that on there. This one is approximately there. This one's here. This one's kind of off to the side a little bit. And this one is pretty small. There. Okay. So at this point, I'm just kind of marking my bony landmarks. And then I'm going to start working on shaping the outside of my hand. So you can tell it kind of has that outside curve, the outer curve. Just, use your hand as your model. You're looking at that to kind of guide how you're carving away your clay. And the wood tool works really well for this too, just to kind of smooth out those fingers so they don't look so blocky. You can see too, like that kind of webbing between the fingers. Mine is pretty pronounced on my pinky here, so I'm going to kind of just, what I'm doing is I'm kind of taking the edge of my tool and kind of just taking off the surface. So I'm not digging straight down and carving out. I'm carving at an angle so I get that kind of more webbed look. So again, here's my knuckle. So now here, that webbing on this between these fingers is a little less pronounced. And again, I want to kind of round out those fingers. You guys can't see it. There we go. Remember to take your time. Sometimes you get in a hurry and then end up cutting too much away and you don't mean to, and then you get frustrated. So here you can look at my hand. The webbing here is pretty defined. It's a little bit less here, and then coming here it's more defined again. So if I'm making a model of my hand like this, I want to be paying attention to like how much of that do I actually see. So here we see quite a bit of it, and less in between the middle and the ring finger. And then this kind of comes down. Of course, in the video, that artist moves much faster than I do, but I would rather take my time and not get frustrated. You can always put it away for a while, put a little bit of water on there to make sure it stays nice and plastic. And then, so again, I could come back in here. I still need to reshape my fingers, but it's getting a more general shape of the hand. What I'm really seeing in here that I'm missing is those knuckles. I definitely need to make those more defined. So what I'm going to do is, since this clay is still really plastic, it hasn't really dried out much, I am going to add little knuckles to my piece. So kind of, again, looking at the general shape of these things, I want to make sure I kind of get a good size. I'm kind of looking at like, that might be a good size for my first knuckle. So we'll go here. I need to go grab some water to attach that. All right, so like I said, because this clay is still really plastic, slipping and scoring is not as necessary as if I had let this sit out for a day and I'm attaching a piece that's really plastic compared to what I'm attaching it to. If you've taken ceramics before, you've heard of score and slip before when you're attaching. Again, this is really plastic clay, so I'm just going to do just a little bit of scoring here. And I'm not even going to bother with slip. I'm just going to put a little bit of water on there. So you can do that a couple of ways. If you have a spray bottle, you can kind of spray it on there. Or you can have a cup or a bowl of water, some sort of brush, just brush it on there and attach that knuckle there. And again, this is where that wood tool comes in really handy for just kind of blending it back in. And I am going to just very loosely kind of blend that in, because I can go back in and define that later. But now I've got that little extra clay on there that'll help define those knuckles. And I want to get this on before I let this sit out, because once, or not sit out, but once I put it away for a little while, I want to make sure that it's going to be well attached and I won't have to worry about the score and slip and all that stuff. I'll have a general shape to kind of work from to redefine later on. So I'm looking at a little bit skinnier actually. Big knuckles. All right. I might even put a little bit down here where my thumb is, so you can kind of see. Maybe like that. So scoring is just kind of breaking that surface, kind of scratching it up a little bit. Same here. A little bit of water. Score. And some water. So again, right now it does not look pretty. But that's the thing about clay, is you can always come back in and redefine things. Carve away, add more to it if you have to. Okay. All right, so we've got general shape of a hand. I definitely need to get rid of some of this extra webbing in my thumb, but we'll come back to that tomorrow. This is just kind of getting the general shape of my hand, the general look of it. Hopefully we'll get through that much in class today, so that you can put it away, kind of keep it really damp so that we can come back and work on it some more tomorrow. All right, so when you put it away for the day, you might want to find some sort of board. It can be cardboard or wood, whatever you have available. something that you don't mind getting a little damp and warped if it does get wet. So I'm just using this piece of wood. And then to kind of hold the shape of the hand when it's just sitting for the night, I am going to put this apron down just to kind of, I'll show you, kind of hold it up so it doesn't just go totally flat again. The first thing I want to do before I do that is put it in a plastic bag. Typically, a garbage bag is better than this. Something a little thicker, like you can even use like a Ziploc bag. Those are more airtight than grocery bags. This is the kind of bag that the clay was sent home in, which is really great, except you guys have that other clay that you have in there. So look for something that's really thick. Look, you can do a black garbage bag. That works really well. Or you can like double it up with the grocery bags. These on their own are actually rather porous, meaning air does get through this plastic. So if I had this, I would use at least like 2 or 3 of these grocery bags to wrap up my hand. So let's pretend I have 2 or 3 that I'm going to wrap this up in. I don't have them on me right now, but when I put it away, I'll make sure to wrap it up again. So I put the hand in there. I'm going to either, if you don't have a spray bottle, just take a handful of water, or like the cup of water that you had for attaching your pieces, and just kind of like spray it in there with your fingers. You can just kind of splatter it in there so that there's enough moisture in there to keep that clay at the same consistency as when you put it in there. The spray bottles are really nice, but I realize you guys probably don't have that. So I just made sure there was enough water, not so much that it's going to become really slimy or anything, but just enough to kind of hold it at that moisture level overnight. So wrapped up in plastic with a little extra water in there to make sure it doesn't dry out overnight. Put on top of some sort of fabric or something soft, an old pillow, an old cushion, whatever you got, to keep it from going totally flat overnight because it's still soft. If it sits on a flat surface, it's just going to like form to the board, and then board to kind of like carry it around in. So you can put it on a table somewhere, make it portable. So then tomorrow we will work on attaching that wrist and putting in more details. So hopefully you get to this point today. We'll also be working on it during class. So we will work on it. If we get further than this, great. If not, we can always come back to the video and see where to go from there. Okay? All right. Thanks, guys.